In the 30 years I've lived here in LA, the question I've been asked the most is, how do I find healing? Now, that may surprise you. It certainly surprised me because here you are in LA with the most talented, the most attractive, most desirable people in the world, and they have the whole package. They're usually smart, talented, good looking, and oftentimes really successful. And so you think the questions you would get would be more about how do I succeed, or how do I attain a different level of excellence, or how do I achieve my dreams, or how do I get the things I long for? But really, most of them are asking, how do I find healing? Most of them become the desire of everyone around them. Everybody wants to be like them. They want their talent, their intelligence, their gifting, their looks. And yet they're just desperate to find some way to be healed. Now, one of the challenging things about healing is that if you have a wound and you do not disinfect it, it actually heals with the infection inside of it. And I think that's what happens to so many human beings. They get wounded when they're young. They get wounded early. They're traumatized as a kid. But their good looks and their talent and their early success, in a sense, covers that wound, and they look healed, but the infection goes deep. And you have to, in a very painful way, reopen that wound to get the infection out if there's ever going to be healing. It's the same way psychologically. It's the same way spiritually. It's the same way emotionally and relationally. Whatever you let get in there early on that you covered up through success, that you covered up through popularity, that you covered up through talent, that you covered up through appearance, that stuff is the stuff that eats away at you all of your life. And then you find years later, decades later, that wound in your soul has festered. But you're afraid to open it up, because if you open it up, people will see that you're not perfect. If you open it up, people will see that you're broken. If you open it up, people will see the pain you're in. And so the great challenge most of the time to the question, how do I get healing? How do I find healing? Is you have to be willing to reopen the wound so that you can take out the infection. You have to be willing to go deep. You have to be willing to be authentic. You have to be willing to be transparent. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. If you're not willing to be honest with yourself about what has actually kept you broken, you're going to carry that brokenness with you all of your life. So the first thing you have to do is realize that you covered the wound, but you did not remove the infection. Bitterness, betrayal, anger, abandonment, loneliness, despair, depression. Those are all the symptoms of wounds that were never cleaned out, the infection that went deep. And so even right now, if you have this sense of shame or guilt or inadequacy or insignificance, and you just can't seem to shake yourself free from that, that's because you covered the wound, but you never healed it. So here's the first thing you need to do. You need to be honest with yourself that you're broken, that there's an aspect of your wholeness that is shattered. It's torn. And you have to take some moments and reflect and ask yourself, what are the things I'm not talking to myself about? What are the wounds? Where's the brokenness? What in my life caused this damage? And without blaming someone else. Because when you start blaming other people, you put the entire weight of responsibility for the healing on them. So what you have to do is you have to take ownership for how you've allowed that wound, that trauma, that experience to shape your entire life. So identify where the wound came from, and then take responsibility for the healing. Here's the great challenge. When you've been broken, when you've been hurt, when you've been wounded, most of the time it is not your fault. Usually it happened to you. It wasn't something you chose. It's something that happened to you and that left you broken and hurting. But how you respond to that actually magnifies that wound or minimizes it. And so you have to realize that even though there are things that you're not responsible for in terms of it wasn't your fault, you are responsible for in terms now it's your responsibility. So first of all, identify what's going on inside of you. Be honest with yourself, and then find someone you can talk to and be honest with them. The process of healing is not a process you can take alone. It's why so many times people will find a therapist. If you don't have a good friend, find a good therapist. If you don't have a good therapist, find a good pastor. Find someone in your life that you can open up your soul to and begin to have a conversation about what left you broken. And then the process of healing, here's the great news. It will not take you your entire life to be healed from what wounded you, but it will not happen overnight. And so somewhere in between wanting to be healed the moment you acknowledge it and the moment you take your last breath, you're going to find an incredible power, because it's not that healing happens right away, but the strength that you need to overcome that brokenness, that will come to you very quickly. Because the moment you take ownership for your life, the moment you are honest with that brokenness, the moment you decide to move toward healing, that's when the healing has begun. And what's really extraordinary, what you're going to find to be so unbelievable, is that in your brokenness, you will actually become stronger. Because it's not the healing that actually makes you stronger. It's the ownership that makes you stronger. The moment you are authentic and transparent and real about your pain, you become powerful. You can use your pain to become your source of power. It becomes the story that you tell. It becomes the promise that the past cannot limit your future. If you'll own your past, accept it in the present, and create a different future.